I died reading this novel. The cannon fodder got kicked out with a fortune, and I thought, that's not a bad ending. So when I woke up as Yin Yin, married to the coldest man in the city, I made a plan. Act spoiled. Annoy him. Get paid. Leave. I just didn't know I'd walked into a wolf's den, and the wolf had no intention of letting me go. I died quietly. That was the first thing I noticed. No pain. No shouting. No machines screaming beside my bed. Just the strange lightness of a body that had finally been set down after being carried for too long. Cancer, final stage. I'd known it was coming. I'd even laughed about it once, thin, breathless laughter, while my mother cried and my brother pretended not to. In those last weeks, when sleep refused to come, I read a novel. I remembered thinking at least this cannon fodder got money at the end. The thought was still warm in my head when I opened my eyes again. The ceiling was unfamiliar. Too high, too clean. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and something sharper, cold, expensive. I lay there, stunned, my hands resting on a chest that rose and fell far too easily. I lifted one hand. The fingers were long, pale, delicate to the point of fragility. Beautiful. I swallowed. Oh, I murmured, voice soft, unfamiliar. Oh no. Memories crashed in like an uninvited tide. A name. A face powdered too carefully. A family that loved loudly but was never heard. A marriage arranged like a transaction. A man who would grow tired, then colder, then cruel in his indifference. Yin Yin. The cannon fodder. I closed my eyes and laughed weakly. So that's how it is. If I was here, then that meant the ending was already written. 3 months of pestering. 3 months of acting spoiled. Then a clean expulsion with a generous check. Honestly, compared to dying in a hospital bed, that sounded merciful. I sat up slowly, waiting for pain that never came. This body, slender, weak-looking, was healthier than mine had ever been. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, toes brushing a thick carpet, and stood. The mirror nearly made me flinch. He really did look like a doll. No, more than that. Too delicate to be real. Long lashes casting shadows under clear eyes. Lips soft, even without color. Skin like it had never known hardship, only neglect disguised as indulgence. In a novel, Yin Yin always wore makeup. Heavy, careful, as if painting himself was the only way to be seen. I stared at my bare face and made a decision. No powder, I told my reflection. Let's annoy him properly. The suitcase stood untouched in the corner of the room, exactly where it had been placed after the wedding. I hadn't unpacked it, not the original Yin Yin, and not me now. It felt like a promise, or maybe a threat. I won't be staying long. That thought steadied me. The door opened without warning. I turned. He stood there, tall and immaculately dressed, as if he'd stepped out of financial magazine instead of a bedroom doorway. His expression was cool, controlled, eyes sharp enough to weigh me in a single glance. My husband, Ji Juechuan. In the novel, this was the man who would eventually hand me money and tell me to leave. The richest man in the city. The protagonist. The wolf. I smiled before I could stop myself. It wasn't planned. It just happened. The corners of my lips lifted softly, eyes narrowing a fraction as if seeking warmth that wasn't there. Good morning, I said, voice light, a little breathy. Did I sleep too late? He froze. Not dramatically. Just a pause, brief, precise, like a miscalculation in a well-oiled machine. You're awake, he said. I tilted my head. You sound disappointed. That wasn't in the script. I hadn't meant to say it like that. Ji Juechuan's gaze lingered on my face longer than necessary. Not the painted face he remembered. Not the exaggerated coquettishness from before the wedding. Just this, bare, soft, unarmed. You didn't unpack, he said finally. I glanced at the suitcase, then back at him, lips pursing without thought. I didn't see the point. Why? Because I won't be here long. Because this is temporary. Because you'll get sick of me. Instead, I shrugged and smiled again, smaller this time. I'm lazy. That earned me a look, sharp, unreadable. In a novel, this was where irritation would bloom, where contempt would take root. But he didn't speak, so I stepped closer. Each step felt oddly natural, like my body remembered something my mind didn't. I stopped just inside his personal space and looked up at him, eyes wide, almost curious. "Do I bother you?" I asked. It was supposed to be annoying, clingy, childish. His jaw tightened. "No," he said after a beat. "You should eat breakfast." Oh, that wasn't right. I watched him turn away, coat draped over his arm, posture straight as ever. When he reached the door, he stopped. "Yin Yin," he said. "Yes." I answered quickly. He didn't turn around. "Don't catch a cold." The door closed. I stood there, staring at the space he'd occupied, heart thudding harder than it should have. "That's strange," I whispered. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Later, alone in the kitchen, I tied on an apron and began chopping vegetables. Cooking had always calmed me. The steady rhythm. The certainty that care could become something tangible. As the soup simmered, I set up my phone. The live stream icon blinked to life. "Good afternoon," I said softly to the camera, smiling. "I'm Yin Yin. Today, I'll be cooking." Comments flooded in almost immediately. "No makeup? Wait, he's beautiful. Is this really the same Yin Yin?" I ignored them, focused on the pot, on the warmth rising with the steam. I didn't see Ji Juechuan standing in the doorway, but I felt him. The air shifted. Pressure. Heat. I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch his reflection in the darkened screen. Our eyes met. I smiled again, and somewhere deep inside, a wolf that I didn't know was watching decided not to let the rabbit go. I learned something important on the second day of my marriage. Annoying Ji Juechuan was harder than surviving cancer. The realization came while I stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, fingers steady as I sliced ginger. The apartment was too quiet. No footsteps, no cold presence watching from the doorway. He'd left early again. Work probably. Always work. Good. Distance made irritation grow. That was the plan. I set my phone on the stand and tapped the screen. "Good morning," I said softly. "Today I'm making steamed fish." The live stream blinked alive. At first, it was normal. A few regular viewers drifting in, comments floating by lazily. Then someone typed something that made my knife pause mid-cut. "Is this really Yin Yin?" I blinked, leaned closer to the screen. My face stared back at me, bare, clean, unadorned. No powder softening angles. No blush hiding pallor. Just skin, lashes, eyes that looked a little too earnest. "I didn't put on makeup today," I said, casual. "Is that strange?" The comments section exploded. "Wait, don't ever wear makeup again. How is this legal? He looks unreal. Wife material." I frowned. "I'm someone's wife already." I corrected mildly, then added, almost as an afterthought, "Please don't say strange things." It only made it worse. Viewers poured in by the hundreds, then thousands. My phone heated against the stand, notifications stacking faster than I could read. I focused on cooking, on the familiar comfort of steam and seasoning, but the words slipped through anyway. "He's too pretty. If I were his husband, I wouldn't let him out. Who married him? Do they deserve him?" A strange sensation crept up my spine. Not fear. Awareness. I wasn't alone. I didn't need to turn around and know he was there. Ji Juechuan stood just outside the frame, silent as ever. I could feel his gaze like a hand pressed flat between my shoulder blades. I kept smiling at the camera. "Careful with the heat," I said gently, lifting the lid. Steam bloomed upward, curling around my face. Delicate dishes need patience. Behind me, something shifted. The floor barely made a sound, but the air tightened, thickened. When I finally glanced sideways, his reflection appeared on the darkened oven glass. He wasn't looking at the food. He was looking at the screen, at the comments, at the word wife repeating again and again, thrown at me by strangers who didn't know my name beyond what I offered them. My heartbeat stumbled. I finished the dish, plated it carefully, and ended the stream with a small bow. "Thank you for watching. Eat well today." The screen went dark. Silence fell like a hell breath. Ji Juechuan didn't speak right away. He walked past me, close enough that his sleeve brushed my wrist. The contact was brief, accidental, maybe, but my fingers curled instinctively, as if trying to catch warmth that had already passed. "That was popular," he said finally. I hummed. "Unexpectedly. You didn't wear makeup." "I don't like it much," I replied. Then, softer, is that a problem? He turned. Up close, his eyes were darker than they looked from a distance. Controlled, measured, dangerous in a way that didn't need to announce itself. No, he said, it's not a problem. I should have stopped there. But my body moved faster than my caution. I stepped closer, tugged lightly at the sleeve of his shirt, peering up at him with what I knew, instinctively, was an annoying expression. You're not angry? His breath stalled, just for a fraction of a second. I don't get angry over trivial things, he said. Oh, I nodded, then smiled, bright and unguarded. That's good. Something shifted in his eyes. Not irritation, not impatience. Heat. He reached out, then stopped himself inches from my face. His hand hovered there, suspended, fingers flexing as if grasping something invisible. You shouldn't let people talk about you like that, he said. I tilted my head. Like what? As if they can take you. The words dropped heavier than he seemed to intend. I laughed lightly. They can't. I'm married, remember? His hand closed. Not on me, on the air, withdrawing sharply, fist clenched at his side. Yes, he said. I remember. That night, I went to bed convinced I was failing. He wasn't pushing me away. He wasn't cold. If anything, he was too attentive. Meals appeared when I skipped them. The living room lights dimmed when my head started to ache. He adjusted his schedule without mentioning it. This wasn't how cannon fodder was treated. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, suitcase still packed in a corner. A reminder. A promise. 3 months, I told myself. Just endure 3 months. The door opened quietly. I turned my head. Ji Juechuan stood there, loosened tie in hand, sleeves rolled up. His gaze found me instantly, sharp even in the low light. You're not asleep, he said. I shook my head. I was thinking. He approached the bed, sat on the edge with careful restraint. The mattress dipped under his weight, warmth seeping through the sheets. About what? I hesitated. Then, honestly, about whether I'm bothering you. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and brushed his knuckles lightly against my cheek. Bare skin to bare skin. The touch was brief, controlled, but it sent a shiver straight through me, heat pooling low in a way that made no sense. You don't bother me, he said quietly. You distract me. My breath caught. Oh, I whispered. His hand dropped as if burned. Silence stretched between us, taut and dangerous. I smiled, small and soft, turning onto my side to face him. Then I'll try not to distract you too much. He stood abruptly. Sleep, he said, voice rougher than before. We're going out tomorrow. The door closed behind him. I lay there, heart racing, cheeks warm, staring into the dark. Somewhere outside the room, a wolf paced, hungry, restrained, already circling. And I, foolish rabbit, still believed I was the one in control. I woke up sore, not injured, not hurt, just aware. Every movement carried a quiet echo, a reminder written deep into muscle and bone. When I shifted, the sheets whispered against my skin, and heat flared low in my body in a way that made me freeze halfway through sitting up. I stopped, breathed, slowly lay back down. The ceiling above me was the same, high pale, impersonal, but everything else felt altered, as if the room had learned my shape overnight. Last night returned to me in fragments. Ji Juechuan standing too close, his hand at my waist, firm but careful, like he was holding something precious that might crack if squeezed wrong. The way his breath had brushed my ear when he spoke my name, low, restrained, almost reverent. Yin Yin. I pressed my lips together. I hadn't planned for that. I'd only meant to tease him a little. Lean close. Smile. Act spoiled until he frowned and stepped away. That was how it was supposed to go. Instead, the air between us had thickened, grown heavy and intimate. His self-control hadn't shattered. It had tightened, wounds so tight I could feel the tension humming through him when he touched me. He'd asked me, voice steady but eyes dark, "Are you sure?" I'd nodded. I always nodded. The memory made my ears burn. I tried to stand. Bad idea. My legs wobbled immediately, knees threatening to give way as a wave of weakness rolled through me. I grabbed the edge of the bed instinctively, breath hitching. That's not right. I wasn't trapped. I knew that. The door wasn't locked. The room wasn't a cage. But my body refused to cooperate, like it was quietly protesting what we'd done to it. The door opened. I stiffened. Ji Juechuan stepped inside, already dressed, hair neat, expression controlled. If not for the faint shadow under his eyes, no one would have guessed he'd barely slept. "You're awake," he said. I swallowed. I was going to get up. He looked at my hands gripping the bed, at the way my weight leaned subtly to one side. His gaze darkened. "Don't," he said. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and crouched in front of me, one knee touching the carpet. His hands hovered again, always hovering, before settling firmly on my calves. The warmth of his palms seeped into me. "You push yourself too hard," he said quietly. My face burned. "You didn't seem like you wanted to stop." His jaw tightened. "I wanted to stop," he said. I chose not to. That honesty made my chest ache. He slid one arm behind my knees, the other around my back, and lifted me without effort. I gasped softly, fingers curling into his shirt by instinct. Ji Juechuan. "I know," he murmured. "I've got you." He carried me back to bed and lowered me carefully, movements precise, practiced, like he'd already memorized the safest way to touch me. He adjusted the pillows, tucked the blanket around my legs. It felt intimate, domestic, dangerous. I didn't mean to. I started, then stopped, unsure what I was apologizing for. Existing? Tempting him? Misjudging the wolf I'd wandered into? He brushed my hair back from my face, knuckles grazing my temple. "You didn't do anything wrong." "That's worse," I muttered. A corner of his mouth twitched. "You're not leaving the room today," he said. I looked up at him quickly. "What?" "Not locked. Not ordered. Stated. Calm. Certain. I can carry you to the couch if you insist," he added, eyes steady. "But you shouldn't strain yourself." I hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Just today." He stood. "Just today." Hours passed strangely. He brought food to me, light, carefully prepared. Fed me when my hands trembled too much to hold the bowl steady. When I flushed and tried to refuse, he only said, "You're my responsibility." I didn't know how to argue with that. At some point, my phone buzzed with notifications. Messages from a stream. From viewers asking when I'd be live again. I glanced at Ji Juechuan. I should tell him I won't stream today. He didn't look away from the tablet he was working on. "You don't owe them anything." "I like cooking," I said softly. "It makes me feel useful." That earned me his full attention. He set the tablet aside and leaned closer, forearm resting on the mattress. His gaze searched my face with unsettling focus. "You don't need to earn your place here," he said. "You already have it." My throat tightened. "That's not how it works," I whispered. His thumb brushed lightly under my eye. "It is with me." The words settled heavy in my chest, warm and terrifying all at once. Night fell. The room dimmed, shadows stretching long and quiet. I lay half asleep when a mattress dipped again. "Ji Juechuan," I murmured. "I'm here." His hand rested on my waist, not pressing, just present. A silent question. I turned toward him without thinking, forehead resting against his shoulder. The scent of him, clean, faintly metallic, wrapped around me. "Am I annoying you?" I asked, the question slipping out like a habit I couldn't break. He exhaled slowly, lips brushing my hair. "No," he said. "You're undoing me." Heat flared again, slow and dangerous. His grip tightened just enough to be felt. "Sleep," he murmured. Before I forget myself, I obeyed, because somewhere between his restraint and his hunger, I had stopped feeling afraid. And I didn't realize it yet, but by the time morning came, I wouldn't be able to leave the room on my own. Not because I was trapped, but because I'd been held too carefully and too completely. By the 3rd morning, my body stopped protesting. It didn't mean I was fine, just adapted, like a bruise you learn not to touch. I woke to sunlight cutting across the floor, pale and quiet. Ji Juechuan wasn't beside me. For a moment, panic flickered, sharp and unreasonable, until I heard the low clink of porcelain from the kitchen. He was there. Of course he was. I tested my legs carefully, sliding one foot to the floor, then the other. This time they held. Weak but steady. I breathed out, relieved, and stood. When I reached the doorway, he was plating breakfast with meticulous focus, sleeves rolled, posture straight. The sight of it, him in my kitchen, doing something so ordinary, hit me harder than I expected. "You're up," he said without turning. "I can walk," I announced a little too proudly. He finally looked at me. His gaze swept over my face, my stance, the way I leaned lightly against the doorframe. Approval softened his eyes, quick and restrained. "Good," he said. "Eat. We're going out." I blinked. "Out." "Yes." No explanation. No hesitation. I should have been suspicious. Instead, my chest lifted with a strange, buoyant excitement. "Where?" "Anywhere you want." The words landed gently, but they shattered something in me all the same. After breakfast, he helped me into a coat, fingers careful at my collar, lingering just long enough to remind me he could have done much more. We stepped into the elevator together, silence wrapping around us like a held breath. Outside, the city waited. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd wandered without purpose. In my old life, my body had been a limitation. In this one, fear had replaced illness. I told myself I was temporary, passing through. Ji Juechuan didn't walk ahead of me. He matched my pace, slow and deliberate, as if adjusting himself to my rhythm instead of forcing me to keep up with his. "Market," I said suddenly. He glanced at me. "Food." I nodded. "I want to cook tonight." His lips curved faintly. Then the market. The place buzzed with life, voices overlapping, scents of spices and fresh produce tangling in the air. People glanced at us, some lingering longer than polite, eyes snagging on my face before sliding to Ji Juechuan with curiosity, then retreating. I felt his hand in my lower back, not gripping, not possessive. "Just there. Don't drift," he said quietly. I smiled. "Worried I'll get lost. Worried someone will try to take you." He replied, equally quiet. I laughed, soft and unguarded. "You're overthinking." His thumb pressed lightly once, as if disagreeing. At a stall overflowing with herbs, an older woman leaned forward, eyes bright. "Young man, you're very beautiful," she said warmly. "Your husband is lucky." I stiffened, then relaxed when Ji Juechuan answered without pause. "I know." The certainty in his voice made my ears burn. "We bought too much." Always did, apparently. When my arms filled, Ji Juechuan took the bags without comment, balancing them easily in one hand. On the walk back, my phone buzzed again. Messages, comments, mentions. My stream following had doubled overnight. "Do you want to stop?" he asked, noticing my distraction. I shook my head. "No, just surprised." He studied the screen briefly. The praise, the familiarity strangers felt entitled to. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "If it becomes uncomfortable, you stop. And if I don't want to, then I'll make sure no one crosses the line," he said. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. That evening, I cooked while he watched, leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled, eyes following every movement of my hands. The closeness was quiet, charged. When I tasted the soup and frowned, he stepped in, dipped a spoon, and tried it himself. "It's fine," he said. "You always say that." Because it always is. After dinner, we sat together on the couch, close enough that our knees brushed. The television murmured in the background, ignored. I leaned back against him without thinking. He stilled. Then, slowly, his arm came around me, weight settling warm and solid at my waist. My breath caught, but I didn't move away. "This is dangerous," I murmured. "Yes," he agreed. But he didn't let go. That night, when he carried me to bed, because I let him, I didn't pretend it was necessity. I wrapped my arms around his neck instead, cheek resting against his shoulder. "Ji Juechuan," I whispered. "Yes." "What happens if I don't leave?" His steps faltered just once. "Then you stay," he said. Simple. Final. The suitcase still sat in the corner, untouched. I looked at it from the bed, a relic of a plan that no longer fit. Freedom, I realized slowly, wasn't about distance. It wasn't about leaving. It was about being able to choose and not being afraid of what you chose. As Ji Juechuan lay beside me, careful even now, his presence heavy and protective. I felt something settle deep in my chest. The rabbit hadn't been caged. He'd walked into the den and found the door wide open behind him. But he didn't step out. The problem with plans is that they rot quietly when you stop checking on them. I realized mine was dead on a Tuesday afternoon, standing in the walk-in closet with Ji Juechuan's shirts hanging neatly on one side and my single, untouched suitcase still waiting on the other. It looked ridiculous now, like a threat no one was afraid of. 3 months had passed without ceremony. No raised voices, no cold withdrawal, no envelope slid across a table with polite indifference. No money. I pressed my fingers into the fabric of the suitcase handle, heart thudding with something that wasn't panic yet, but close. This wasn't how the novel went. In the book, Yin Yin was driven out right about now. Tears, tantrums, a humiliating scene, a large sum of money to silence him. I practiced that ending in my head while dying. But Ji Juechuan didn't push me away. He pulled me closer. I cooked. I streamed. I went out when I wanted, came back when I pleased. He adjusted meetings around my health, canceled dinners when I frowned too long, learned the exact pressure my back liked when I was tired. Worst of all, he looked at me like he was already ruined. That afternoon, when he came home early, I was still standing there. Yin Yin. His voice carried from the doorway. What are you doing? I turned. He froze when he saw my expression. Not coquettish. Not smiling. Bare. I said slowly, we need to talk. Silence snapped into place between us. He closed the door behind him and crossed the room in long strides, stopping just short of touching me. His restraint had sharpened over the months, not faded. Every movement was deliberate now. What's wrong? He asked. I laughed weakly. That's my line. I gestured at the suitcase. Why haven't you sent me away yet? The air changed. Not violently. Not explosively. It hardened. Ji Juechuan's gaze darkened. Something dangerous and naked surfacing for the first time without restraint. What did you say? In a novel. I rushed on, words tumbling out before I lost courage. This is when you get tired of me. You give me money. You tell me to leave. I thought. You thought what? He interrupted, voice low. That you'd get sick of me, I said. That this was temporary. His jaw clenched. He reached out, then stopped himself, fingers curling into a fist at his side. How long? He asked quietly. Have you been planning to leave? I swallowed. From the beginning. That was the wrong answer. The room seemed to close in, not trapping but focusing. His presence filled every corner, every breath. You came into my house, he said, each word measured, slept in my bed. Let me touch you. I didn't let you. I snapped, panic flaring. I wanted you to throw me out. His eyes burned. Do you have any idea, he said, voice shaking now, what restraint costs? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. He stepped forward. This time he didn't stop. His hands caught my wrists, not rough, but unyielding, pinning them gently against the closet door. The wood was cool against my back. His body blocked everything else out. I controlled myself every time you smiled at me like you didn't know what you were doing, he said. Every time you acted spoiled, leaned close, trusted me. I didn't know. I whispered. I know, he said. That's why I waited. His forehead pressed to mine, breath hot and uneven. But don't you dare tell me this was temporary. Tears stung my eyes, sharp and humiliating. I was scared. Of me, of staying, I admitted. Of wanting this. Of finding out it wasn't real. His grip loosened. Slowly, he gathered me into his arms, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other firm at my waist. I shook against him, breath hitching as the weight of everything crashed down. There was never any money, he murmured into my hair. There was never an ending where you leave. I pulled back, searching his face. Then what was this supposed to be? His gaze dropped to my lips. This, he said, and kissed me. Not careful, not restrained, claiming. Heat flared, deep and overwhelming, stealing the breath from my lungs. His hand slid up my spine, holding me close, reminding me with every touch that he'd been holding back for me. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against mine. You're my wife, he said, not a character waiting for a payout. My chest ached. You're obsessed. Yes, he agreed calmly. and you're free. That night, I didn't walk straight. Not because I was trapped, but because I was loved with a devotion that left me trembling, undone, held so completely that the idea of leaving finally felt absurd. The suitcase stayed where it was. Unpacked, eventually, not out of resignation, but because there was nowhere else I wanted to go. Ji Juechuan point of view. I didn't like Yin the first time I met him. That impression was immediate, sharp, and unfairly final. He arrived 10 minutes late, face painted carefully into something exaggerated, too pale, too sweet, lips too red. He smiled too much, spoke too softly, leaned in too close. Every movement felt rehearsed, every glance calculated to invite indulgence. Coquettish. I disliked coquettish people. They wanted something. Attention, money, leniency. And when they didn't get it, they broke loudly. Yin sat across from me that day, fingers curled around his teacup, lashes fluttering as if they weighed too much. He laughed at nothing, asked me questions he didn't wait to hear the answers to. I remember thinking, this will be troublesome. The marriage went through anyway. Families, business, responsibility. I told myself I would tolerate him. On the wedding night, I didn't touch him. Not because I was kind, because I didn't want to. Then he moved into my apartment. And the man who walked through my door was not the person I remembered. No makeup, no calculated smile. He stood there quietly, suitcase by his side, looking around as if unsure whether he was allowed to exist in the space. When he looked at me, it wasn't inviting, it was searching, tentative, open in a way that made no sense. I didn't recognize him at first. I should have said something sharp, corrected him when he smiled too easily, told him to stop clinging, stop acting spoiled. But then he looked up at me and made a face, small, childish, entirely unguarded. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't raise my voice. He looked like porcelain, not fragile in the way of weakness, but in the way of something that had never been dropped yet. Something that would shatter not from force, but from carelessness. From that moment on, everything became dangerous. His coquettishness wasn't strategy. That was the problem. He leaned close because he trusted, smiled because he thought it pleased me, tugged at my sleeve like a child who didn't know it was tempting fate. Every time he did it, my thoughts turned dark. I imagined pressing him into the near surface, imagined how easily his breath would stutter, how quickly his hands would cling, imagined all the ways he would look at me if I stopped pretending I was patient. And every time I stopped myself, because he didn't know. He didn't know what he was offering when he looked at me like that. When I saw people on a stream call him wife, something in me went cold and vicious. I wanted to take his phone, turn it off, hide him where no one else could see. Instead, I stood behind him and said nothing. I told myself it was for his happiness. That was a lie. It was because I wanted him to choose me freely. The night he couldn't leave the room without help, I carried him like something sacred. Every step felt like restraint carved in a muscle. He was warm against me, pliant, trusting. If I had used force then, he would have let me. That was unbearable. So I waited. I watched him bloom without makeup, without armor. Watched him laugh more freely, cook with quiet joy, wander the city with eyes wide, as if seeing the world for the first time. Freedom, he thought, meant leaving. I knew better. Freedom meant staying because he wanted to. When he asked about money, about being sent away, I finally understood the depth of his fear. He had never believed he was wanted, only tolerated. That was when restraint stopped being possible. I pinned his wrists, not to hurt him, but to make him listen, to make him understand that every moment of patience had been a choice. That obsession didn't have to be loud to be absolute. When he cried, I almost lost myself. When he stayed, I did. I claimed him not because he was weak, but because he was brave enough to trust without knowing the cost. Yin still acts coquettishly sometimes. Every time he does, my thoughts turn filthy. And every time, I pull him closer instead of breaking him. Porcelain deserves care. And he is mine, not because I trapped him, but because when the door stayed open, he chose not to leave.